Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Sound check, sound check, sound check. Test, test, test. Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2.
Oh, they have it.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Sound check, sound check, sound check. That's like a tent for us, huh? Is that our tent? Let's go bring him a bag, dude. Hold on. So.
Okay. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Sound check, sound check, sound check. Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2. Testing 1, 2, 3. Test, 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 test. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Can everybody hear me okay? A Traveler Coming Home by an unknown author. A traveler ventured forth one day upon a long and winding road, with faith and trust to lead the way, with strength and will to bear his load. And at a slow but steady pace, in cold of storm, in warmth of sun, he journeyed on from place to place and gained some value from each one, until at last one quiet night he climbed a hill's soft rounding crest and saw afar a single light that seemed to promise peace and rest. Then following its glow he came upon the house in which it shone. A voice inside called out his name and told him he was truly home. Now all of us must travel too. Like his, our paths wind slowly on. And surely when the course is through, a welcome comfort waits beyond. May we believe that sweet content is earned by all those miles past, and never doubt each traveler's meant to reach a loving home at last. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Lucas King, and I'm honored to be the celebrant for today's service, as we mourn the death and celebrate the life of Richard Kaminski. Known to many as Richard, to some as Wild Man, and to a few as the Beard of Knowledge. Folks, as we begin our services today, I do have one request, and that's that you turn off or silence your cell phones so that they don't go off and disrupt the service. Also, we are live streaming and recording today's service. So in a few moments, you'll have an opportunity to come forward and share a memory of Richard if you'd like. And just keep in mind that if you do that, there's probably about 10 or 15 folks from home that are going to hear what you say. So just keep that in mind. Gathering is something that is innately human. Whenever we see or pass a crowd, our curiosity is piqued. Think back to the last time you were driving or walking and you noticed a group of people. What's the first thought that comes to mind? What's going on over there? What's happening? Because a gathering is a signal to the rest of us. Something important is happening here, and it's happening now. We don't gather for the trivial. We don't gather for the mundane. We gather for the moments that matter. And we don't just gather when times are good. We don't just gather to celebrate. We gather to comfort the sick. We gather to care for those who can no longer care for themselves. We gather to say goodbye. We gather to grieve. We gather when we simply don't know what else to do. Today we gather to say to Richard, I loved you, and I still love you. I saw you, and I still see you. You matter, and you always will. If the events of the last several months have taught us anything, it's that gathering matters. It's one thing to choose not to attend an event or a gathering because maybe that's your personality. You just don't like people that much. But it's a completely different thing to be told, you can't come. Our world has been turned on its head. Something like a hug or a handshake that used to be so normal now gives us pause. A smile, to or from a stranger, is now hidden from view. Normal, or our illusion of it, has been shattered. Our collective world has been turned upside down, and yours is doing somersaults because Richard is gone. Today is a bittersweet day. Gathering because of loss will always be bitter. But today will also have sweet moments to it, because we are together to honor and to bear witness to a talented, rebellious, fun, loving, caring person. As you might imagine, I have a lot of conversations with people about funerals. Whenever I find myself talking to someone about what they might want in a memorial service, many express a similar sentiment. Well, I don't want my family to fuss about me when I'm gone, or I don't want people to make a big deal. But think about the things in life that we make a big deal. Graduation parties look back over the diligence and effort to complete a course of study. Retirement parties reflect back on a career. Birthdays celebrate only a day. New Year's Eve parties celebrate the ending of a year and the beginning of another one. A Super Bowl party celebrates just 4 hours. Richard's life spanned 66 years. We gather, we celebrate, and we acknowledge the events, the achievements, and the people that we value the most. So today we're going to make a big fuss over Richard. Mark Raboud said, taking pictures is savoring life intensely every 100th of a second. So at this time, we're going to watch a video tribute that was put together by Rick to honor Richard's life. Author Donald Miller compares funerals to the climactic scene of a movie. The climactic scene is where everything the main character has been working toward. All the strife, all the obstacles to overcome, the lessons learned, the ups and downs combine to answer the questions, do they have what it takes? Did they work hard enough to accomplish their goals? Was it all worth it? For you Disney fans, it's that moment when Simba defeats his Uncle Scar for the Battle of Pride Rock, or when Aladdin outsmarts and traps Jafar inside the lamp. It's that moment in Roadhouse when Dalton and Wesley finally face off in an epic battle. It's the moment when everything comes together. And as we sit here today, reflecting on and reliving the scenes of Richard's life, we also come face to face with grief. Grief seems to be one of the Western world's dirty little secrets, almost as if it doesn't exist as long as we don't discuss it. But in not discussing grief, we do ourselves a disservice. And if we don't talk about grief in a setting like this, on a day like today, then when are we going to talk about it? Imagine going to a wedding and never once mentioning love. There are a lot of misconceptions about grief, the most common being that grief comes in stages. In 1969, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross published her book on death and dying. And for the first time, the world was introduced to the 5 stages of grief. They're so common that many of you can probably come up with at least 1 or 2 off the top of your head: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. These stages have become something they were never intended to be: a prescription, a process, a step-by-step guide to move on, whatever that means. Loss often makes us feel out of control, unsettled, like our world has shifted and normal no longer exists. The harsh reality that few seem to want to admit is that loss hurts. We know it hurts, yet when someone says, "How are you?" we hesitate to say, "Terrible, thank you for asking." We avoid this answer for 2 reasons. 1, putting our loss and feelings into words is challenging. And 2, how will people respond if we actually tell them the truth? I'm guessing that most of you have been to the ocean. Think about those times when you're standing in the water. If you pay attention, you'll notice that the waves are cyclical. Some of the waves are small. We barely notice them. Then there are those medium waves. They hit you, but you manage to stay standing. And then there are those large waves that come out of nowhere, knock you over, and leave you clawing to get to the surface. And this is grief. The waves ebb and flow. The tides go out and come in. There are calm days when everything almost feels normal. Medium days when something is definitely off, but you're not exactly sure what. And then there are the rough days that knock us over and leave us clawing to get to the surface. Psychologist J. William Worden suggests an alternative to the 5 stages of grief by offering the bereaved 4 tasks. Instead of sitting idly by as the weight of grief falls on our shoulders, we can actively participate. The tasks are simple, but they are not easy. And they are not to be completed once, never to be visited again. They are ongoing. The first task of grieving is to accept the reality of the loss we've suffered. And this is part of what we're here to do today. But we have thousands and thousands of moments as we walk the path of acceptance. The second task is to experience the pain of grief. No one likes pain. When we see tears, we grab tissues. When we break down talking about our loved ones, we say sorry as though we've done something wrong. When we can't eat, we feel weak. When we forget what we were doing, we try to pull it together. But this pain is natural, normal. Some might even say necessary. We all will experience this pain differently because we have different pain tolerances. The way we grieve is simply an extension of our personalities. So if you are one of those task-oriented doers, you'll dive into the phone calls, the details, and the minutia of the planning. If you've always been a little scatterbrained and it's difficult for you to stay on task, you have a high likelihood of getting on the freeway and forgetting where you were going in the first place. If you're a person who keeps your emotions inside and controlled, you will probably resort to a more emotionless exterior when dealing with loss, not really wanting to talk about your feelings. If, on the other hand, you cry during Applebee's commercials, songs, and sappy movies, the tears will probably flow quite easily. You'll tell anyone and everyone how you're feeling. From your best friend to the person at the Starbucks drive-thru who instinctively says, "And how are you today?" If you've always liked to be alone, you will not develop a sudden love for large groups. If you feel love and support being surrounded by others, you will find solace in your community. This, of course, is not an exhaustive list on how to grieve. These are just a few ways. None of these ways of grieving are bad and none are good. They just are. You will all grieve Richard's loss in your own way because you all loved him in your own unique way. So it's okay to be sad. It's okay to feel lost. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to wish for more time. It's okay to say this isn't fair. It's okay not to be okay today. And in the days, weeks, months, and even years ahead, no philosophy or religion ever taught can prevent this completely normal and natural reaction of the human heart. But with a guy like Richard, it's also okay to laugh. It's okay to smile. It's okay to joyfully acknowledge the imprint that he's left on your heart. The year was 1954. The baby boom was in full swing. Elvis Presley cut his first commercial record. A new craze was sweeping the nation. More families wanted to work on their own homes, complete their own projects without the help of an expert, do their own maintenance. So the do-it-yourself, or DIY, trend was born. A gallon of gas was only 29 cents. And on October 20th, 1954, Richard was born. Someone once said, if you're the baby of the family, be honored. It means your parents finally had the perfect child and they stopped at you. Richard joined Mom Travis, known to many as Honey, Dad Jack, brothers Bob and Tom, and sister Jackie to round out the family of 6. Honey worked at Norton Air Force Base most of Richard's childhood, and his dad worked many different jobs. Richard's childhood was not always an easy one, but there were several bright spots along the way. Like when his dad was a traveling salesman. Richard had a sharp mind from an early age, and one fond childhood memory was when Richard served as the chief navigator on Dad's sales trips. The ideas of maps, different locations, the best routes to take, how to get somewhere faster or better was something that fascinated Richard. In fact, he often spoke of wishing he'd been a truck driver, just so he could figure out how to get places quicker. He was intrigued by all the things that had to go right for a delivery to be successful. After graduating from high school, Richard put his brilliant mind to use for the San Bernardino County Unified School District. For the vast majority of his nearly 4 decades of service, Richard worked as the stock and tool room clerk. His mind, that operated more like a point of sale or an inventory system, was a gift. Anyone who needed a tool, needed to order something, or needed to check inventory could go sit at a computer, type in the part number, and hunt it down, or you could just go ask Richard. But this wasn't enough to keep his brain stimulated, so he decided to prepare taxes on the side, for fun. Nothing can keep a person occupied quite like a wife and kids, though. In 1979, Richard was set up on a date with a young lady named Jane. Although she didn't know him as Richard, she knew him as Kaminski. Jane had a quick wit, a smart mouth, and loved to argue. Sound familiar? A mutual friend named Howard thought that Richard and Jane would be a good match, so she gave Jane Kaminski's number. Never one to be intimidated, she called the house. Richard's dad answered, and Jane asked for this Kaminski. Richard happened to be in the shower at the time, but he promptly called her back after he dried off. On their first date, they went to the Orange Show, and sparks flew. When you put 2 people together who love to banter and argue, you're bound to have fireworks. By the end of the night, Jane was saying, "You're so ornery," and Richard corrected her, thinking obnoxious was a better term to describe himself. And Jane exited the car with what could only be described as an exasperated growl. And that, folks, was love. Not long after this romantic first date came a romantic proposal. Jane was the one to call Richard and ask him out, so she took the lead on marriage as well. She pulled him close and said, "I want to have kids. We need to get married." They drove to the Little White Wedding Chapel in Vegas, and just like that, they were husband and wife. Not long after, they went from husband and wife to mom and dad, with the births of Mary and Rick. As a parent, Richard was the disciplinarian in the household. If you wanted a yes, it was better just to go to mom. The love language in the house was witty banter. Both Richard and Jane loved and knew how to press each other's buttons in just the right way. The kids remembered Richard making a bet one year on the World Series. His team was winning, the other team was up to bat, and Richard had just left the room. So Jane let out a yell and said, "Hey, Richard, what does a grand slam mean?" Prompting a swift return to the room to see what was really going on. Richard knew how to get her back, though. Anytime he wanted to push her buttons, all he had to say was, "Well, that's not how my mother would do it." And at one point, those brave words prompted a food fight. In addition to the witty banter and throwing of food, Richard loved taking the family out on road trips. They say it's not about the destination. Enjoy the journey. Richard missed that memo, at least when it came to the road trips. Mary and Rick remembered a trip that consisted of going to State Line, visiting the Grand Canyon, and going to Vegas in 24 hours. Driving around and looking at Christmas lights was also fun, and it was also fun to see him, or to catch him playing Super Mario Brothers. Although the latter could be a little frustrating because he needed to get every single solitary coin. Sadly, in 1996, Richard had to say goodbye to the love of his life and verbal sparring partner. Being a single dad was not easy, but Richard did the best he could. Rick remembered how hard he worked to make sure the kids had everything they needed. Mary remembered him being a stickler for grammar, made sure they spoke correctly. Today I see, yesterday I saw, often I have seen. He wasn't the best at helping out with math homework, though. He could get the right answer, but could not tell you how he got there. Rick had this to say about his dad. Dad, it has taken me a while to sit and to think about what I should say. The words I find myself with are, I'm sorry and thank you. I'm not sure which one you needed to hear more from me. Thank you for my sense of humor and my love of music. I'm sorry I didn't become a rock star yet. Thank you for teaching me my love for science and academics. I'm sorry I wasn't a great student. Thank you for being such a character. All of my friends know the stories about you. I'm sorry that more friends won't get to meet you. Thank you for believing in me even when I didn't. Thank you for helping me when I needed it, even when I was too proud to ask. Thank you for the road trips and teaching me about geography. I'm sorry I can't recite all 50 state capitals off the top of my head. I always enjoyed playing music for you. And I was very proud of you for sharing your singing with the masses. Singing Weird Al with you at the Magic Lamp will be a cherished memory. I know that you would have made Grandma Honey very proud as well. I'm thankful you were able to retire early and enjoy your life. You always had a good story to tell. We couldn't go anywhere around town without you running into someone you knew. More than one person has told me, if you met your dad once, you never forgot him. And this is the truest statement I have ever heard. I was always proud to be able to make you laugh, even when you were mad at me. I will miss our conversations. P.S. I'm sorry I never learned how to play chess. Someone once said your task as a parent doesn't really end when your children leave home and start a family of their own. It's then that life gives you a grander title, that of being a grandparent. Considered to be a step higher than that of the child's parents, you take on the role of mediator, confidant, and most trusted friend. Being a grandparent is one task that is filled with love, light moments of laughter, and another chance to relive the good old days of childhood. Richard put the grand in Grandpa. Andrew and Justin brought a smile to Richard's face. He loved hearing stories about how they would mispronounce words or any kind of humor involving the bathroom. Mary remembered humming a song the other day, Another One Bites the Dust, only to hear Andrew say, Another One's Fancy Dust. The great thing about this is that Richard would kind of do the same thing. Once upon a time, Richard had ears like a bat. The kids couldn't get away with just about anything. But as time went on, as years of playing music too high at a high volume impacted his hearing, it was harder and harder for him to understand certain words. So never one to admit defeat, he would occasionally, or often, mistake things like Stater Brothers for city rollers, and a whole host of other words and phrases. After retirement, Richard found joy in a multitude of different activities. Taxes, chess, checkers, drafts, kept his mind occupied. Taking road trips kept his body occupied. And singing, with the encores, kept his voice occupied. Richard seemed to excel at whatever he was doing. He was so good at chess and checkers that beating him would earn you a free sandwich at the Green Shack Marketplace in San Bernardino. He amazed everyone with his famous date trick. For those of you that don't know, you could tell Richard any date, and he could tell you what day of the week it was. Sonny Barger, founder of the Hells Angels, said, the greatest thing I have learned is probably the simplest thing any of us can learn. I am who I am. Richard was who he was. Honest, hardworking, prideful, tough, ornery, obnoxious, never one to back down for a fight, never one to let go of an argument, and also someone who brought joy to so many through his songs, his little date trick, and through just being himself. Leo Buscaglia said the majority of us lead quiet, unheralded lives as we pass through this world. There will most likely be no ticker-tape parades for us, nor monuments created in our honor. But that does not lessen our possible impact. For there are scores of people waiting for someone just like us to come along, someone who will live a happier life, merely because we took the time to share what we had to give. Too often we underestimate the power of a touch, a smile, a kind word, a listening ear, an honest compliment, or the smallest act of caring, all of which have a potential to turn a life around. It is overwhelming to consider the continuous opportunities there are to make our love felt. You are here today because you felt Richard's love. His life made an impact on you, and yours made an impact on his. So at this time, we'd like to invite anyone who would like to come forward to share their favorite Richard story. If you do come forward, just keep in mind that this podium isn't the most stable thing in the world. Some people like to lean on it, so don't lean too hard on it if you do.
Richard was my friend for 31 years. We met at work, my first day of work, and it was November 29th, 1989. The boss walked us up there, and as the man was saying, Richard was, he dominated the tool and supply room. We walked by and he said, and this man who lives in here is Richard Kaminski and all that. And I was Richard's assistant in that tool room, and among other things there at the school district. And the thing that jumped out at me is that Richard was completely unapologetic about who he was, and he didn't need to apologize, but he was unapologetic about it. You accepted him, or you just went on down the road. That's the way he looked at things, and the way I looked at things too. Richard was anything but ordinary. I could have been broke down all the way across the United States. I had one phone call and Richard would be there in short order to help me out, and I was the same way with him. His kids were just really babies when I met him, or close to it, and mine were too, and we were the best of friends. I was proud to be Richard's friend, and shortly before he died, a few days before, I was talking to Richard on the phone, and I had been feeling kind of, well, because of this COVID thing and whatever, for about a year we really couldn't get together much, just talk on the phone. So I told him, I said, hey, I want you to give Rick my number. I said, I don't have it, and I want Rick's number. It was just something I kind of felt, and sure enough, that was something that I would need. And you can't get by in this world by just feeling. Richard was logical. I remember when I first met him, I had the impression that he was atheist because everything was facts. Religion really didn't have any, it wasn't logical. Sometime later, maybe 10 years, I said, well, are you an atheist? He said, no. He says, there's a God and all that, and we talked about it that whole time, but I just figured because he was so logical, he couldn't believe in such a thing. Richard had standards, and he was just the best. He was the best friend. I don't think that I can ever see a day where I don't miss him. If you were lucky enough to be his friend, it was a treasure. And I'll miss him every day for a long time. Anyway, here we are in this place, and things are pretty much routine in life most of the time. Richard was not routine. He was ours.
Morning, everybody. So, Richard was my uncle through marriage, which means he absolutely had no reason to be nice to me, none whatsoever. And I wasn't particularly a very social or good child, which means he had even less reason to be nice to me ever. But he was always really, really nice to me. In fact, I had to think about it a little bit. I hadn't seen him in quite some time. And I was trying to explain to my wife why I was going to be here today, and I hadn't seen him in such a long time. In the family, we don't really talk as much as we probably should. And I thought back, I can't remember a single solitary interaction with that man that wasn't pleasant. I can't remember a question that I would ask, and I'd always ask a ton of questions that he didn't have an answer for. And I think probably the most important thing, at least to me, is he taught me how to play chess. And that's still a huge part of my life. And I don't think I ever would have touched it if he, I was curious about the board, and he sat down. And I never knew about the green check thing. I think he never figured I could beat him, so he never even put that on the table. I would have practiced a lot more if I knew there was a sandwich at stake, but he never bothered with that rule with me. But I don't know. I think the measure of any person is being decent to those when you don't have to. And he was always decent. He's a good man. So.
I'm going to attempt this. Morning. I always remember Christmases when we were younger. The families all get together, and there was always a VHS tape of the Three Stooges for me and my brothers. And me and my brother Neil would watch them in the middle of the night and laugh hysterically, even though we knew it was coming. But I always remember it's always something I look forward to. I remember being a teenager thinking I knew everything, talking to my Uncle Richard, who probably did know everything. And he always talked to me like a peer. He never talked to me like I was a kid. I remember running into him at the grocery store with a female friend of mine who he assumed was my girlfriend. So he went on and on about how great I was. And I liked trying to be the ultimate wingman. And I was like, hey, she's my friend, we're just getting stuff. He's like, okay. And he looks at her and he says, well, now you know everything if you change your mind. I know after he retired, and after my mom was living alone, he would go visit her, take her out to lunch. He was a good man. Good. Thank you.
I haven't met very many of you folks, but I'm Richard's older brother. Actually, I'm from my dad's first family. I don't know if any of you realize that Richard, Tom, and Jackie were from his second family. Well, I was married and moved out here. My dad soon followed with his wife, Connie. Wonderful lady, great person. I got to meet her shortly after they got married, and were living in Greenbelt, Maryland at the time. And we moved out here, and I started raising my own family, which sort of tied with Richard started working on his family. Say that one peculiar aspect of our relationship was that my daughter was a little older than her uncle. It took a little explaining from time to time, but I didn't get to socialize with Richard a great deal. Our family always did have dinners together over the holidays, and we rose to enjoy him through that time. And I wanted to say that thank you all, especially those of you that participated with him and related to him during singing ventures. I know that was just a marvelous part of his life, and he always told us a tale or two from that was his contribution to the family chatter. But Richard worked hard to raise a good family. It was a little tough for him because he didn't really have a lot of good parentage to guide him in that respect. So a little shortage of that on his dad. His mother was a darling. She mourned and tried to make up for the deficiencies of his father. But we participated in food and social activity with him during those holidays, 4 or 5 a year. We never could get him to cook, but he came down and participated by helping us down a turkey or a ham, whatever it needed to be. He was good with that. And I'm so proud of his 2 children. Richard did a great job on both of them, and under some dire circumstances, I'm sure. Both of the children grew up and went to college, so very successful parental activity on his part. The rest of the first family, I moved we were all living in this area. We lived in Rialto for a time, and then moved on down to the West Coast. We lived in Palos Verdes for a good many years. But I still see Richard periodically. He came down, and he and a friend came by to move a refrigerator for us. He was always a pretty husky guy and knew how to do that very well. But anyway, my thoughts of him, I'm very proud of the way that he conducted his life and the friends that he met and participated with, and the singing activities at these various homes for the aged or convalescing. It was just wonderful on that part, and probably represented the family more of his activities. So that's really about all I have to say. And of course, I've been very sad about and surprised over his early departure. And I think he was just about ready to enter a new phase of life by moving into a new area there. And we made a lot of friends. But he left his son, and Ricky lived, went to work and lived down there near Irvine, close to where we lived, although we never got to see him during that time. He was very busy with his new job, as it was. And I'm sure that he'll begin his family activity in here one day. And a nice lineup of children to say nice things about. But that's really all I have to say. And, thank you, each of you, for your friendship to Richard. He was lonesome in some respects, and you folks made a great contribution in helping him overcome that. So, thank you. Thank you all for coming to honor his memory.
How's everyone doing today? I knew Richard for 44 years. And I met him in the school district, just like you. First day on the job, and last night I was thinking about Richard, so I wrote some notes down. And I was thinking, man, I knew him 44 years, and like I said, I met him at San Andreas High School. It was my first day on the job, and the San Bernardino School District had a wonderful training program. Go out there and ask the guy that's working out there, and he'll tell you how to do the wood job. So I walked on campus, and there was this guy, and it turned out to be Richard.
And he showed me, I worked there about 3 or 4 days, and he showed me the ropes, told me a lot about the district. I learned a lot from him. I didn't listen a lot, or I would have found another job. And so that was the big training program they had, but he was more than willing to help anybody along, and he showed me everything I needed to do. You're thinking, boy, 44 years ago, and I got some notes here, it's going to be boring. No. First thing I want to tell you, there's nothing that was boring about Richard. Kaminski, Richard Kaminski, or just Richard. I remember most people called him Kaminski. And over the years, I thought about that. He was so proud of his heritage and thing, I think he just went by that name. And because even today, I was down at the auto shop and a couple months ago, and I said, "You guys seen Richard Kaminski?" And everybody said, "No." I guess he's the first guy I ever met. He went by his last name mostly more than he did his first. One thing I noticed you all said, and I'll say it too, he did things his way. He did what he wanted to do. There are many people like that we don't know. I knew Kaminski. He was his own man. He did his own thing with free will. And that's hard to find nowadays. He had old school values. He had integrity. He was very thoughtful. He was a stand-up guy. He always treated people nicely, as you guys stated. I remember I was living on one corner, and he was living close by me. My mother was down at the other corner, and he would walk by me, my house, and come down. He had new children. He pushed them. They were walking with him, or he was pushing them in a cart. And that lasted a few years until he moved again. And my mother didn't speak much English, but Richard didn't care. He just went on and spoke with her, tried to interpret her language, and pretty soon they were holding a full conversation. And he had a knack for that. It was unbelievable. And he was very proud of the children when he saw them, except you when you ran in the street. Too young to remember that. And he always talked fondly of his kids. And like I said, what can I say? He was a gentleman, and you don't find very many of them anymore. He was a very unique individual. He stood his ground in life, and he was a good citizen, always questioning authority. And that's good quality, too. Best thing I wrote down here, I said, how do you summarize him? And he was brilliant and a complicated person. If you wanted a different opinion, he was willing to give it to you. And what a refreshing person that is, especially in this politically correct environment we live in now. I do. He wasn't afraid to express his opinion. I remember talking to him about languages one time. And out of the blue, I was taking a computer science class on how to design computer languages. He started talking about how languages developed in the world, how they nurtured, and I told him, well, I believed that the Chinese language was really complicated due to the character, and he proceeded to explain to me how it had actually evolved into a very simple language, which some words, there was less words, but it's depending on how you pronounced them and put the infusion in the words, and how the characters developed. And I'm going, where's he getting this from? I do remember going back to my instructor at the college. I learned more from Richard than I did in a semester from this guy with a doctorate degree about languages. And I hear everybody talk about his chess playing. Richard was an accomplished chess player. He had a great library of books. He'd show it off. I mean, just rows. I think he probably had one of the best collection of books written by some of the great masters. And I believe he read every one of those books. I remember one of the first computers I bought was most people won't even know what it was a Texas TI from '99. And it was a powerful machine for its time. And I laid out $39 for a cartridge that would play video chess. I invited Richard over there to play that thing. 15 minutes later, he beat it. I never bought another chess program again. So a couple of years went by, and I decided to write my own chess program because I really didn't. I played chess, but I didn't know anything much about chess, and I still don't know a whole lot. I mean, you're using Mary B. Weather movement number 3 here to beat it, and I'm going, okay. So I read a book about that, decided I was going to program it, and I wrote a program. It took about 2 years to write it. It's over time. Took my time writing it. I invited him over. By God, I did better than that 15 minutes he spent on that 39 country. He beat it in about 18 minutes. Last chess program I wrote. This was around 1979, 1981. We used to talk about it, and he enjoyed playing the game, but it just wasn't the same unless you played. And of course, I believed after writing that program, he never invited me for that sandwich either. I don't know what a lot of you believe. I believe right now myself, he was released from his body of a shell. I like to think he's out there exploring the universe now, because I can look out there and see him peacefully hanging out with friends, smoking a cigarette, drinking a big old cup of coffee, big old smile on his face, and probably playing 4 games of chess. He lived life as one of the most interesting persons I've ever met. And I had the privilege of meeting him. And as they say, as a cliche, stay thirsty, my friend. They wrote that commercial for him. So, if my vision's correct, I'll see him at the edge of the galaxy at a chess club out there somewhere.
Well, thank you everyone so much for your willingness to share. And I'm sure there are many, many more stories about Richard. And so in the coming days, weeks, months, and years, continue sharing those stories. In doing so, you keep his memory alive. For those of you who were keeping count when the service started, you may have noticed that I said there were 4 tasks of grieving, but only mentioned 2. The third and the fourth are tasks that may take the rest of your lives, and that's okay. Task number 3 is adjusting to the environment without your loved one present. And this is not something that you will do or are meant to do today, tomorrow, next week, next month, or even next year. And the fourth task of grief is to find an enduring connection with Richard as you slowly begin to take steps forward. And there are so many ways to stay connected. Nietzsche said, "Without music, life would be a mistake." Richard was a lover of music, so maybe you carry on the tradition. Keep singing, humming, and contributing to the playlist of the world. Richard was consistently reminding Mary and Rick, "You're a Kaminski, and Kaminskis never give up." Richard was a fighter. He pushed through a lot of challenges in his life, kept putting one foot in front of the other. And so when you're discouraged, you can channel that fight. Richard was full of little quips and sayings. "Yeah, see? I've got to go pick up my one-armed grandma from the airport because she's got 2 suitcases. It's colder than a witch's." Probably shouldn't finish that one here. "That's the ticket. It's blowing like a French." Shouldn't finish that one either. And a whole host of other things. So maybe the next time someone asks you how you're doing, you say fair to middling. Play chess or drafts, go to In-N-Out, choose to read instead of watch TV. Be unapologetic about who you are. Richard's stories are now your stories. They live on in each and every one of you. Folks, I'd like to thank you so much for allowing me to be here today, to be such a small part of your lives, and for the privilege of sharing Richard's story. I'd like to close our time today with these thoughts from Mary to her dad. Dad, you did it. You broke through to the other side. Just as Jim said, no one here gets out alive. Perhaps you're up there enjoying a moonlight drive. Folks, that does bring our time together here today to a close. Thank you so much for coming today. And as you leave today, we're going to be listening to one of Richard's signature songs, 16 Tons by Tennessee Ernie Ford. Oh. Let me actually connect it to the speaker.
Say a man is made out of mud, a poor man's made out of muscle and blood and skin